Hi, and welcome back. Angie Homley-Zabo here to show you the beginnings to a new project. This project is maybe the most intimidating project I present to my students, and it's for my Intro to Drawing class, and we draw a charcoal self-portrait, which sounds like a super big deal, and it kind of is. There's a lot that goes into a self-portrait. So what we do is we break it down into little parts and take one little bite at a time, which is the very best way to tackle any large problem in life, not just in art. We start this process by taking a photograph to draw from. We are taking what we call a reference photo. And you take a reference photo in a very different way than you take other types of photos. There's very specific things that we look for. You want to have a reference photo that has great lighting, great composition, and tells a story about the subject. And since this is a self-portrait, what do you think the subject is? You. So you will be taking a selfie reference photo, not a selfie for social media. They're very different. Some things that you need to look for when you're taking a reference photo, whether it's of yourself, somebody else, or a different object. One, you need to have great lighting. Great drawings have interesting shadow structures. So if you're taking a photo for a reference, you need to have interesting value structures in the photo. So the first thing I'm going to show you in this video is how to think about lighting your subject and tackling that photo. You also need to make sure that your photo has really clear edges and lines, that one side of your face is so dark or so light that you can't see part of your eye or part of your nose. So make sure you have really focused photos and that you can see all the parts of your face. You need to have a good reference. You can't draw what you don't see. So make sure you can see all the parts of your face pretty darn well. Once you're done taking your photos, I'm also going to show you how to edit the photos. And you can do this on your phone, you can do it in your computer, wherever you have editing hardware. And last but not least with your photo, I'm going to show you how to grid it. We found a pretty great website that does this really easy peasy. Once you're done with your photo, our next step is to prep our drawing paper, and that will be my next video. One thing I want you to note in this next section where I show you how to take your photos, I've switched my camera to black and white, and that's what I want you to do on your phone as well. It'll help you see those value structures as you take your photos. So enjoy, learn a lot, take it slow, and just one little step at a time, my friends.
My studio, I want to talk with you for a minute about how to set up lighting to take your self-portrait. I'm going to use my daughter Zoe as an example. So I'm in my studio. I'm going to turn off the main light source, and I'm going to use these two lamps. One is on a gooseneck, and another one is connected to the wall. And I'm going to use those lamps to vary the lighting on my subject's face. So you can see when there's too much direct light, there's not going to be enough shadows. I can bring it more to the side. You can see shadows starting to appear on this side of her face. I can turn this light off, and then I've got shadows from the ring light in completion. If I turn that back on, her shadows are more towards the center of the face, and I can play with this light off as well. This is what gave us the best shadow structures on her face. If you look, you can see that there's a lot of highlights, there's midtones, and there's dark shadows. Once I figured out my lighting structures, then I'm going to try taking lots of different photos from different angles. I'll have Zoe tilt her head, but if I was doing selfies, I'd be tilting my head. So Zoe, do you want to turn this way over here to your left? So you get a different look when she tilts her head in a different direction. You can see that shadow line down the center of her face. Do you want to face the light a little bit? Here we can see there's too much lighting on the whole face. When I change it to black and white, there won't be enough contrast to do anything interesting. So Zoe, do you want to show what you have in your hand? And why do you have paintbrushes?
Because I like art.
Okay, so we're trying to show that in your portrait, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Zoe.
So this is how many pictures we started out with. So take a ton of photos when you're taking photos. Take way more than you think you need. Try lots of different lighting, lots of different angles, different positions. Try different places in your house. Take a lot of photos. Once you've taken the photos, you're going to go in and you're going to delete and narrow down. The first thing I always do is I go in and I delete any photos that are bad. So eyes are closed, photo is blurry. I just don't like how I look in it or how my subject looks in it. You're making a funky face. Delete the ones that aren't good. After you've deleted those, the next thing that you want to do is go in and take a close look at your shadow structures. So I looked at all the shadow structures on these, and most of them are pretty good. My first two, though, aren't the best shadow structure-wise. So if we look at this one, do you see how Zoe's face is really washed out? It's almost all white. That's not one that's worth keeping. A beautiful photo for other things, but a drawing tool it is not, and that's what we're looking for. We have the same problem with this photo. Really lovely photo. It's a nice, flattering photo. It's clear, but we basically have one white shape here on her face and then one all gray shape on the rest. There's not a lot of variations within the shadow on this side of the face. So I wouldn't use this photo either. Then, as we go down into the photos here, we start to see more interesting shadow structures. So if I take this one as an example, I've got some good highlights here, but I also have some shadows, subtle shadows on the light side of the face. I've got some interesting light and shadow play happening on the left cheek. I can see her eyes clearly, nose, mouth. I can see all of those edges. It's a really nice photo to draw from. I have all the information I need, and I've got a lot of shadow structures that I can follow when I'm doing my mark making. It's a good guide. My next step then is to do some simple photo editing. So I would take a photo. Let's say I take this one. And the first thing that I would do is crop the photo. And I want to decide, do I want this to be a long photo? Do I want it to be a tall photo? Do I want to have more of the background and body in it? Or do I want to zoom in really tight on the face? Do I want it centered, off-centered? Do I want to have more or less behind her? I'm also noticing when I zoom in on this one that it's a little blurry. And if you look carefully, if I look at the eyes when I zoom in, do you see how it gets really grainy? And it starts to be difficult to see the shapes and the edges of my eyes, the shapes and the edges around the nose. And if I can't see those on the photo, when I go to draw it, I'm going to have a hard time drawing that photo. So I might not use this one. Once you're done cropping your photo, you've decided what shape you want it, what you want in the frame, what you want out of the frame. Your next step is to go in and do some adjustments. So in your phone, you've got lots of different tools that you can use to adjust the contrast and the lighting on your photo. I'm using a program on my computer because it's easier for me to show you. You'll often have a brilliance, exposure, highlight, shadow, brightness, contrast. These are all options that have to deal with light. So you can take and drag any of these tools back and forth to kind of play with the lighting and the structure of your photo. And you can do funky things if you want, but what you want to make sure you're doing when you're playing with this lighting is that you don't lose information, either to too dark or too light. You want to make sure that in the end you have a photo that has some really nice highlights that are bright but not too bright, that you've got some midtones in between that show you some of the subtle variations in the planes of the face, and that you've got some good shadow structures. Again, you're trying to build a tool to draw from. You're not trying to build a photograph to print and put somewhere. So I want to make sure that I accentuate the shadow structures and maybe even pull them out a little bit more than they were in the original photo. This is going to be a good drawing tool. Aside from the blurry edges, I've got some nice shadow structures all over this face. At this point, I go in and I finish editing all of my photos until I have a sense of what I want to work with. Then I'm going to go in and make my final choice. At first, this was a big contender. But as I zoomed in on the facial features, I noticed I really couldn't see that left eye well, so it got tossed out. This was a nice one, as was this one, but in the end, I went with this piece. It felt like Zoe, someone who is forward-looking, and when I zoom in on all those facial features, I can see the edges of every one. Your last step in creating your photographic drawing tool is to grid your portrait. If we were in class, we would print off your photo and we would grid it using a ruler and a Sharpie. But we're not in class, and we found this great tool, so we're going to use this griddrawingtool.com to grid our portrait. It's pretty easy. You go to this website and you can do it on a phone or on a computer. You hit start. Then you're going to choose a file and upload it. Once your photo is uploaded, it gives you the option to rotate, crop, and adjust, all things that I've already done on my computer and you've likely done on your phone. If that's the case, you can skip right through these steps. If you don't have good editing tools on your phone, however, make good use of these. All right, this is the last and most important step. We're applying our grid. I'm going to print my photo off, so I want to use a white grid, and I want to have this print up to a size that it's going to work well with the drawing paper that I grid next. So if you have a portrait like mine that is taller than it is long, I'm going to have you change the grid dimensions to 8 boxes wide. So if you have a tall portrait like mine, 8 boxes wide. If your portrait is longer than it is tall, which is called the landscape format, you're going to have your photo at 11 inches grid dimensions. So I'm going to do 8 because mine is taller than it is long. If yours is longer than it is tall, you'll do 11. Once you've got these set to 8 or 11, depending on your orientation, and a white line, you're going to hit Apply Grid. And there's my gridded portrait. Last but most importantly, hit Download. You're going to download this to your phone or your computer so you have this access. If you have a printer at home, I'd like you to print this off. It's nice to have a paper copy to look at. Otherwise, keep it on your phone. You can use it that way too. There's one more step that I like to do, and that's what I call, if I'm in class, battle shipping my portrait. So I would apply letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on, and numbers 1, 2, 3 down the side. When I'm drawing, this helps me kind of get oriented to where I am on my grid, and I'll talk more about that in our next step, which is graphing our paper. So get your photo taken, get it gridded, save it, and then get ready to graph some paper.